You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
You know, one of the things that people complain about most often nowadays is going to gigs and people chattering all the time, and that how distracting they find it. It's a theme, isn't it?
Oh, it is. Yeah,
Definitely a theme.
Fisticuffs.
Well, I was listening to a wonderful old jazz record. Bill Evans Trio recorded. It's called Sunday at the Village Vanguard. It was made in. It was recorded on June the 25th, 1961, at the Village Vanguard, tiny little jazz club in Greenwich Village. And the way this is recorded, it's just a piano and a bass and drums. You know, it's not a noisy record at all. But all the way through it, you can hear the hubbub of people in this quite small club. Some of them paying attention, but some of them are probably at the bar at the back, and they're just chattering and ordering drinks and so forth. And I think this adds enormously to how attractive a listen it is. You know, that it's never distracting. It's just kind of part of the music of the experience. And it struck me thinking about this, that actually the artificial quality in live music nowadays is silence. Because in most of the long history of performed music, there would have been background noise, wouldn't there?
Absolutely.
You know? And it's only quite recently, this idea that you kind of shush and you got to listen really carefully, has kind of come along. And so what that brings with it is a sort of tension. Is there anything
Absolutely.
in this? You know what I mean? You think, if my stomach rumbles, people are going to feel it's spoiled their experience. Whereas you listen to Bill Evans in June 1961, and it's a small jazz club. I've actually been reading about it. It had a capacity of 123. It was wedge-shaped.
That's amazing.
Wedge-shaped, so that the act were at the point of the wedge, and then it went backwards, presumably to the bar at the back, which is where you'd normally place a bar. And these particular shows were recorded on Sunday, in the afternoon shows. So I want you to envisage it's a sunny day in New York City in 1961, and you and your significant other have just decided, maybe you've gone for a walk in the park, you might have popped into Macy's or whatever, but then you thought, let's go to the Village Vanguard and listen to the Bill Evans Trio play. And so you get in there, and it's you've come in out the sunlight, and you're in the dark. You're bunking off from life, aren't you? You really are. You know, you're playing hooky.
No lighting. There's a cheeky little drink on the go. Everything
responsible. You've possibly had a dry martini. You may even have had two. And so, you know, you can feel that sense of people kind of, having an illicit pleasure in the background noise of that record. And I think it's a hugely important part of what makes it attractive. And I actually asked if on Twitter, if people have got other suggestions for other records that are similar, and a few of them came in actually.
Oh, I saw that. Yes, in fact, I've been listening to some this morning. Somebody mentioned the Joe Henry Reverie album, and that is fantastic. It's just absolutely wonderful. There's a track called Deathbed Version. We should put a link to it actually at the end of this pod, which starts with just with a barking dog, his neighbour's dog barking, and you can hear footsteps, I think, on the ceiling above. You can hear cars. You can hear bird song. It's really interesting. And he
lives in a very old house, doesn't he?
Yeah. All the windows.
It's called the Garfield House. It's a very historic house in Los Angeles. And so when he does loads of his recordings there, I think he recorded Billy Bragg there and all these things he produces.
No, it's so interesting. He said once he entered that field, he said that he said the songs and recordings significantly diminished without the birds and the dogs and the cars. He said it felt like a film with no score. I thought that was really interesting. Another one that was mentioned was the Alex Chilton's record. Alex Chilton was recording, and I think there was a power cut. It was at the knitting factory in New York in 1997. There's a power cut, and they had to carry on. Somebody lent him an acoustic guitar, and it was done all by candlelight. And the record was called Electricity by Candlelight. And that is absolutely amazing because the noise of the audience is so loud that it's almost as if Alex Chilton is the background sound.
Yeah,
You can just hear the clattering of plates and people laughing, And I find that very, very attractive. There's an amazing version of Every Grain of Sand by Dylan on the bootleg series, which in the middle of which his Alsatian starts barking. And I like those things very much because there's broadly two types of recordings. As you say, there's the kind of clinical, silence in the background studio thing, which is artificial and it's edited, and there are overdubs and there are retakes. And then there's the idea of live music. And what I find attractive about live albums is you feel it can't be edited because you've got that background noise. You notice if there was a jump, And there's something about the real warmth of that interaction, and you can visualize yourself being there, can't you? You can put yourself into that club watching Bill Evans.
Yeah, there's other ones being suggested. Velvet Underground live at Max's Kansas City, which is quite interesting. I think it was just a cassette recording or something, just something done by somebody in the audience. But many people regard it as their favorite Velvet Underground recording. Because here's the important thing. Those kind of live recordings, they're before they were the legendary Velvet Underground. They're just a group. You know what I mean? And so the fact that the audience are sort of not impressed, it's kind of part of the deal. There's an equality there, which you don't get later on. Somebody also suggested Georgie Fame and the Blue Flames recorded live at the Flamingo, which I can't say I'd ever really heard before, because the other thing about those kind of their venues is they're quite small, and so you don't hear a roar of the crowd. There aren't that many people in the place, and it's just got a kind of warmth and an approachability that a lot of things don't have.
Tweeted about that, didn't he? He said, I think there's a bit where it says that you can hear a voice saying, don't forget the bar is open for Cokes and hot dogs. Now that's great. that really makes a difference, doesn't it? I love things like that.
The Word Podcast, prime cuts of popular culture served fresh each week.
Well, look, we've both seen the story about Britney Spears reported to have got $15 million advance for her memoir. Now, I have to say, I don't think this is preposterous. I know everyone's up in arms about it, saying, how could that possibly, how could anyone be paid that much? I think you've got to look at what the commercial value of Britney Spears' memoir might be. And let's say that's, call it £11 million. And in hardback, it's £20 a hardback. And let's say she's on one of those deals where she gets £4 a copy. So she's got to sell 2 million hardbacks. Now, there's millions of other ways that she could be making money. The film rights, which we shall come to, obviously all the paperback, also the promotional value of Britney Spears being involved in the first place. You got to remember, Michelle Obama sold 10 million copies. Now, I think Britney Spears' story is piping hot.
Can I just say there's going to be one major difference between Britney Spears' book and Michelle Obama's book, which is apparently very good, Michelle Obama's book. I'm not knocking it at all. But I bet most copies are unread, whereas Britney Spears' book will be read cover to cover because she had an extraordinary, unique life story. Wouldn't you say?
It's incredible. If you look at the way it starts, I'm trying to think about the movie. So if you get the memoir and it has the full story, which we will do, then that will be the basis of the film. We will have all of it. So that's incredibly commercially valuable in itself. I'm trying to imagine it as a film. There's a bit where aged 5, she's winning kindergarten graduation contests at school. That makes a great movie. And that makes a great book. Don't you think? I can see that in my mind already. She was signed up to the Mickey Mouse Club pretty young. And I think at about 11, she was cast in various productions alongside, and again, this is fantastic, alongside Christina Aguilera, Justin Timberlake, Ryan Gosling, and Kerry Russell. So they're
it's a whole generation. They've been bred for this kind of thing.
Absolutely. It's incredible. There's the whole story of the success of "Hit Me One More Time" and all that sort of stuff. And there's the videos. But then there's also the marriages. I mean, one of those marriages, I think she's been married twice. I think or possibly 3 times. She's certainly been married twice. The first person she married was her childhood friend, who she married in a Las Vegas wedding chapel. And how long did that marriage last, Dave?
Days, I think, wasn't it?
55 hours.
There you go.
55 hours.
So that's the chapter.
I know. So that's a chapter in itself. And she married somebody else a bit later in 2004. I think they married 3 years. And then, obviously, this is the really sad aspect of it, the kind of sort of breakdown, really. But the relationship with the parents is absolutely riveting because, as is the case with childhood stars, so often it's a question of what's the balance between being supportive and being exploitative. And she finished up in a situation where her father was controlling all her finances, and then that massive court case involving millions of her fans all over the world, which she eventually won. I mean, that's an amazing story. Don't you think?
I tell you, the thing that makes it work, because when I read this, $15 million, I thought that's got to be exaggerated. And I spoke to my publisher. I said, is it? And he came back to me and said, no, it's not exaggerated at all. That is probably what they've paid, because those are the kind of market values of huge celebrity tell-alls. But here's the interesting thing about the Britney Spears story, Mark.
Yep.
Is it puts together two formats which are proven successes in the publishing world. One is the story of massive success. And the other is the genre that is known disrespectfully in some corners of the book trade as the boo fucking who memoir. You know what I mean? She's got both of those things going for her, hasn't she? She's got a genuinely tragic, difficult personal story and a genuinely extraordinarily successful professional story. They're both in there. And because she started young, she's still quite young. You know what I mean? She's not going to look like an old lady talking about, something that happened 40 years ago, is she?
And the promotional value of her talking about this book on the international market is absolutely
there is
staggering.
There is no TV sofa that will not want her. Will not be patting come sit by me. If you can't think of anything nice to say about somebody, come sit by me.
Sit next to me.
As they famously said. So, Britney Spears, $15 million for the memoirs. We're saying it's a steal.
It's a bargain.
It's an absolute bargain.
It is.
I can't believe you got away with it.
I know.
This is a junction in the word podcast. It separates that bit from this next bit.
We neglected to mention last week, actually, the passing of the great PJ O'Rourke. And this week, we were both looking at a clip of PJ O'Rourke, which seemed particularly apposite in this week of all melancholy weeks. PJ O'Rourke giving a little lecture in London, I think it was.
It was largely about freedom, isn't it? The idea of freedom.
He was talking about, he says, the thing that gets my goat is people talking about things but not being fair. He said, I've heard this all the time because I've got a 12-year-old daughter. He says, who's constantly saying things aren't fair.
It's not fair. I haven't got an iPad. I don't like all this food. IPad. Yeah, that's right. I hate my parents.
He said, one day I snapped and I turned to her and he said, look, honey, you're cute. That's not fair.
Not fair. You're born in America.
You're clever. That's not fair. Your parents have got some money. That's not fair. You're born in the United States of America. That is really not fair. You better get down on your bended knees and pray that the world never gets fair. Which I thought, it's got a stretching a point, but I thought, but I can, the father of a 12-year-old, I can sympathize with that. We've all been there.
He's so funny. He once said on the childhood tip, he once said that everybody knows how to raise children except people who have them. Which I thought was really good. And also, regarding the idea of international freedom, he made a brilliant quote.
So true. I never thought that before.
Absolutely, it's brilliant. It's all that backseat driving thing. Another thing is about on the question of current, very topical question of international freedom. He said giving money and power to government is like giving whiskey and car keys to teenage boys. I thought that's fantastic.
Yes,
I know, it's so true.
Yes,
one other great quote from him I thought was, she's talking about that whole idea of intelligence. He says the C student starts a restaurant, the A student writes restaurant reviews. That's again really, really spot on.
Yeah,
overqualifications. The people who are less qualified are the ones who are making all the money and doing something genuinely enterprising. He's fantastic, I think.
Absolutely. We shall miss him.
Yeah.
We shall miss him. As we shall miss the passing this week of the guy I always say was my favourite British singer, Gary Brooker of Procol Harum fame. Oh God, I just love he's the only person I've ever given an award to, Mark. Did you know about this?
Is that the Prog Awards? It was, wasn't it?
I was asked to go to the Prog Magazine Awards and give an award to Gary Brooker. So I had to get up and make a short speech about Gary Brooker.
What did you say?
I just said it was a fantastic British voice that was it kind of reminded me of great British actors' voices, that Anthony Hopkins or Laurence Olivier or whatever,
Yes,
There are certain people, just through the quality of their voice, have a magical quality of authority about them that is not given to other people.
Yeah.
It's just kind of something in their pipes, And the fact that Gary Brooker's, the people talk about White Shade of Pale, which we should talk about because it's an extraordinary phenomenon. People talk about the song, and all right, fine, the song, and all right, fine, Air on a G string and all that stuff. But it's Gary Brooker's voice. It's the way he sang.
I think that there's something about his voice that's it's completely untheatrical. There's no tricks. It's soulful. It's touching. And I think one of the most attractive things about it is there are certain people who you admire as incredible singers, like, K.D. Lang or Joni Mitchell or whatever, but it was very hard to join in with them and sing along with their records.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas there are certain people, Carole King being a really good example, and Gary Brooker, I think, being another, whose voices are, you don't feel threatened by them. You feel involved, and you don't feel overshadowed if you wanted to kind of join in with it. There's something, he never upstages you. And I think it's absolutely extraordinary, that voice. Astonishing.
And there's so many wonderful cases. It's obviously not just White Shade of Pale. It's a Salty Dog and Grand Hotel. And I was intrigued to read that when they were lining up the final episode of The Sopranos, which is that very mysterious ending where they're in the diner. And they were trying to decide what piece of music they're going to have at the end. And Steve Van Zant's suggestion was The Devil Came from Kansas by Procol Harum. And which is, if you can hear it, you go and listen to it. You can well imagine it being used at the end of The Sopranos. No, he was a remarkable British voice and insufficiently recognized as that. Of course, again, his passing means, there's loads and more sort of think pieces about White Shade of Pale and so forth. One of which I saw the headline the other day saying, White Shade of Pale, what a song of its era that is. And I thought to myself, because I remember that era, I'm not so sure it was a song of its era. It's just an absolute, outlier, that record. It just shows how records, they're just strange things. They just capture a quality which lives forever, And I was just mugging up again on the story of how that got made. Yeah, and it's, we've launched this new thing, Down the Rabbit Hole, where we talk about, complicated rock stories, because the interesting ones are complicated. They're not simple at all. And
more complicated than this. It's extraordinary.
This is extraordinary.
Because I remember he was right. He had the melody. Is that right? They kind of based.
Well, hold on. It goes back further than this. Okay, let's start with. So you got Gary Brooker living down. He's down in Southend. He's living. He's a former member of the Paramounts. He's living with his mother in a bungalow in Southend. Okay, so this is not what you think of. It's not swinging London at all. It's a bungalow in Southend, and he's just playing with, chord progressions and so forth. Keith Reeves, meanwhile, is a kind of scene maker in London who goes to see Chris Blackwell and says, I write words. And says, do you write tunes? He says, no, I don't write tunes. I just write words. And he's clearly one of these guys like Bernie Taupin, who's walking around with arms full of pieces of paper. What are effectively student poems. This is what Chris Blackwell obviously thinks, this guy's kind of got something, but I can't be asked to work out what it is. And so he says, why don't you go and see Guy Stevens? So Guy Stevens, the great kind of scene maker, DJ, A&R man, Mott the Hoople, all Sue Records, all Chuck Berry, all this kind of stuff. He looks at him as well and thinks, this guy's got something, I can't be asked to find out what it is. So I introduce him to Eric Clapton and says, well, why don't you write some lyrics with them? They kind of look at it going, well, no, we've got Pete Brown anyway. He gets shuffled along all the time until he eventually gets linked with Gary Brooker. Okay, so
happened to have written that melody, hadn't he?
Just happens to have written the melody through the post. Oh, sorry, the thing I forgot to mention was, where did the title come from? Guy Stevens' wife.
Overheard at a party, wasn't it?
At a party, said to his wife, she was looking a bit peaky. You've turned a whiter shade of pale. Yeah. Keith Reed wrote this down and attached it to his poem that he already had, and sent it to Gary Brooker. Gary Brooker kind of works it up, and thinks, oh, this has kind of got something. The next thing they know, they're in a recording studio, and they make a demo, I think, and then they make it again properly. And I think the only two members of Procol Harum who actually played on it were Gary Brooker and Matthew Fisher.
And Matthew Fisher was the guy who came up with that counter melody at the beginning, didn't he?
Yeah.
Because Brooker came up with the chord sequence.
This is it. And he was picked up by Tony Hall, the great Tony Hall, DJ, A&R man, scene maker again, who thought, this is amazing. And put out on DRAM and became a #1 record in the UK. And when they did a survey not long ago, in 2009, in fact, it is the most played record on British radio ever.
I saw that. It's bigger than
over the years.
Bohemian Rhapsody or Hey Jude. Isn't that amazing? So how much? No wonder it was the big court case, which we won't get into. But no wonder it was the court case, because the revenues being generated by that every year must have been pretty substantial. In fact, Gary Brooker must have largely lived off it, mustn't he? I assume
you must have thought so.
Deservedly so. But I'm interested that you don't think it's of the time, because I'm not sure if I agree with that. I think musically, it's something completely timeless about it. It could have come from any time at all. But I think that lyric, whether he did that deliberately or was just a bit of chance, I don't know, but he's managed to capture the essence of that kind of the Chaucerian Miller's Tale idea, the Vestal Virgins, the kind of the Alice in Wonderland fantasy about the playing cards. That's very psychedelic. That's peak psychedelia, don't you think?
Well, except that if you go and listen to the record, the record does not remotely sound psychedelic. The thing that it used to get likened to, actually, at the time, they used to say, have the band been listening to Procol Harum?
Oh, right.
Because they had a very not dissimilar sound, and, two keyboards, all that kind of thing. And actually, the singer that the most, parallels Gary Brooker is Levon Helm.
Yes. Again, another unshowy voice. Yeah.
And had that fantastic quality of being able to start something, Virgil Kane is my name and I served on the Danville train. And you're there.
Yeah.
You're put in a place.
Yeah.
Gary Brooker had that same quality. And I think Procol Harum had a very similar quality to the band. They're not like Cream. They're not like, name your own psychedelic group. They sounded really grounded. And I think you could have put out that record any time, in the years since, and it would have made as much sense. But
what a great opening line. Do you think? We skip the like fandango, turn cartwheels across the floor. You have to keep listening. You're just projected directly into something that needs explaining.
Well, also the way he wrote it, when he wrote it, you realized that what made it work was it seemed to come back on itself. It seemed to just go round in a circle.
Yes.
That was part of the attraction of the way he did it. So you play it now, all these years later, and it's no less powerful than it was at the time. Absolutely no less powerful at all. You couldn't improve it in any way. Could not be done. And they probably knocked it out,
Probably done in 4 takes, and doesn't sound remotely dated, does it? It's absolutely extraordinary.
The Word Podcast. Fix yourself a drink and it's like being in the pub.
Okay, we all like to think of the ideal way to spend our birthday. Well, our Patreon birthday guest this week made sure he had the absolute perfect way to spend his birthday. Being a Spurs supporter, he went with courage in his heart, I would imagine, and fear in the pit of his stomach. He went all the way to Leeds. The sun shone, and Spurs won 4-0. What finer birthday present can there possibly be?
And you return with a spring in your step.
I did.
A hat on the side of his head, a spring in his...
Swinging round lampposts, clicking his heels.
Avi Chaudhuri, over to you. How was it? How was your day out?
It was marvellous. In fact, it was a day I think that between the two of you would have approved of, because I went obviously to Yorkshire, which is where you're from, David.
Yes.
Watch the Spurs win 4-0, which I think made both of us very happy.
Absolutely.
And then returned to London and met with some friends who I've not seen for a while in the evening. And we spent a significant proportion of it talking about the Beatles.
Oh well, I'm sorry.
That's a dream ticket for me.
The sun shone. The sun shone as well. Absolutely, that's perfect. So, is your birthday today, or
today is the day? Yeah.
Come on, this couldn't be better. Couldn't be better.
And the original birthday was a Sunday as well. So, it's all good.
Right. Well, as is traditional, we invite Patreon birthday boys and girls to fling an item onto the agenda, or ask a question, or run something up the flagpole. What would you like to introduce, Avi?
Okay. Well, let me put it into context. Many years ago, I went to see a play at the Royal Court Theatre, and we got the sort of announcement that one of the actors was indisposed and his part would be played by an understudy.
Right.
And the understudy was absolutely fantastic. And I said to my companion, that guy is, he was great. He's one to watch. And it was Gary Oldman.
There you go.
That's good.
There you go. So my question is, have either of you, in your long experience of listening and going to watch musical artists, seen someone who you thought from the very start was going to be immense, going to be massive, and were proved right?
God.
Oh, that's a tricky one. So they'd have to have been a kind of just a member of a band who went on to be something extraordinary.
Yeah.
I saw. Well, I'll tell you what. I saw. Okay, this is going way back, and I think it was Package Tour in probably 1965 or 6. Headlined by Manfred Mann, I think. Yes, and down the bill were a band led by a school teacher from Birmingham, who introduced the lead singer, who was, I think, 15 years old at the time, and said, "This is little Stevie Winwood." And,
that's great.
And he was 15, and they called him Little Stevie Winwood. It's kind of, it was a play on Little Stevie Wonder. It was a child prodigy kind of thing, Yeah. And he sang "Georgia on My Mind," and you thought, "Oh my God, that's that's something quite remarkable, So that's the one that immediately springs to mind with me. But they, it's quite interesting with kind of understudy actors. They're people traditionally disappointed when they turn up at the theatre and they get a piece of paper in there. Slotted into their program saying the part of Laurence Olivier will be taken by Fred Nurk or whatever. Yeah. But Fred Nurk's probably really damn good, actually.
Yeah. The interesting pop fact about Gary Oldman is that he was born on virtually the same day in virtually the same year as Gary Newman. There you go.
That's very
I think there's about a week apart or something. That is peculiar, isn't it?
That's top quality stuff. That is.
I don't know why I know that. I just do.
Was Gary Newman born Gary Newman, or
no? He's called Gary Webb.
Gary Webb, which is, of course, just like Harry Webb.
Harry Webb.
Yeah.
Cliff Richard, Yeah. So that's something. You had another question. Did you say you had another one?
I did, and it's this is one that I suspect the word massive may be interested to know the answer to. I noticed that word in your park or word in the park is on the 18th of June.
Is it 18th? I think it is. Yeah,
which happens to be Paul McCartney's 80th birthday.
Oh,
oh my Lord! That wasn't deliberate, actually.
Oh right. Well, that was.
Are you thinking that there was a connection?
Is that the rumor?
Yeah. All right. So there's nothing he'd rather. He's been sitting there for God knows how many years, thinking, "What I really dream of on my 80th birthday." in the Hepworth Ellen interview, wouldn't that be great?
God, is Paul McCartney really going to be 80 this summer?
Yeah, it struck me that because there was a big thing in the papers yesterday about Glastonbury and saying, how he's the headlining act on the Saturday night or something. I was thinking he's going to be 80 by then, by Glastonbury.
Yeah. So, is that confirmed? So he is going to be.
Oh, yeah. And I just wondered if there'd ever been an older headlining act. I mean, there's been lots of Johnny Cash's and people like
not
that.
Not a Glastonbury.
They weren't 80, actually. So I think not a Glastonbury. I think that's pretty fantastic.
Although, to be fair, that kind of, when I wrote my 1971 book, when I wrote the book after it, so it's like 2017, which is about the decline and fall of the rock star.
Oh, yeah.
I think I'm right in saying that Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard, Fats Domino, and Chuck Berry were all still alive at that stage. So they're all well into their 80s. And Jerry Lee Lewis is still with us.
He is. And living in Ireland, I think, isn't he?
Is he?
Oh, good God.
Wow,
oh, dear.
That's interesting. Too close. Too close for comfort.
Shiver down my spine. Well, we can neither confirm nor deny that Paul McCartney is going to be the special guest at our Word in the Park on June the 18th. But, if you thought that was the case, you would be remiss in not making sure that you reserved a ticket as soon as possible.
Indeed, so.
Avi, what are you doing for the rest of the day?
My wife has booked a table at a local gastro pub, so we're going up there and meeting some friends. For a convivial afternoon, I hope.
What fun with these blue skies, cloudless skies.
It is. Absolutely. It's lovely. Absolutely
lovely.
Have a lovely day and a very happy birthday, and we'll see you soon.
The Word Podcast. Clearly, there is no plan.
Okay, any other business? Where we're joined by Alex Gold, is he in heaven or is he in Miami? You're in Miami, aren't you, Alex?
I'm indeed. I'm the Miami correspondent. And
we can hear the ship's kind of intercom, sort of is that right in the background?
Is it like a truck? Does it have a reversing light on your ocean liner? So liner coming back.
We were in Nassau in the Bahamas yesterday, as one does.
Just say that sentence again.
Clang.
Go on. Go on again.
We were in Nassau in the Bahamas yesterday, and we were reversing out of sort of Cruise Alley, and I was thinking actually about a big old beeping that should be present but isn't. But amazing driving skills. Honestly, we did something that resembled a 3-point turn and then zipped back out into the ocean.
So you probably know this. How long does it take for an ocean cruiser, a liner, moving at top speed to stop? Because isn't it meant to be something like a mile or something?
It will be.
If you put your full reverse on, you see a kind of whale ahead or something. I mean, I don't know. I think it's meant to be about a mile. It takes.
Well, actually, speaking of whales, I regularly feel a big thunk, and apparently that is when. I mean, it can't be anything else. I've gone over this. In my head, I've gone through submarines and sea monsters. The only thing it could possibly be is a whale. Which is, but apparently that's because the ships don't have sonar, and so the whales can't detect them. But
then if they did have sonar, the whales would probably be disorientated or something worse would happen. Exactly. So you can't win, can you?
But the thing about these is go on.
So yes, time for reader correspondence. You've got
Paul Burke's one.
I don't. Okay. First of all, I just talk about Branwell Johnson. We were talking about Horselips the other week, and he has a mate who's a big fan of Horselips, who recently discovered that founder member Charles O'Connor, founder member of Horselips, was running a guest house near Whitby, and so he was such a devoted Horselips fan. They actually booked himself in last year in the hope of meeting the host. But despite seeing O'Connor a number of times over the course of his stay, his friend was too tongue-tied to engage in conversation and bring up the band.
That seems absurd because A, that's the reason he went to stay there. And B, there would be nothing more that an ex-member of Horselips would like to discuss, surely, than the great days of Horselips. They'd be
absolutely
pull down the pewter tankards and get stuck in. Oh,
yeah, I think that's a shyness above and beyond the Call of Duty. That is. So yes, we were. Was it Owen Parker? Yeah, go on.
Oh, it's just so funny. Owen Parker, this wonderful thing about playing the wrong Rolling Stones song at a funeral. It's just a fantastic story. Under my thumb. And
no, it's at a wedding. At a wedding.
Sorry, at a wedding. What I'm talking about, the wedding is worse. It was the reception. It was the moment his wife came on, wasn't it, to the dance floor or whatever. Paul Burke said this fantastic thing about another funeral thing. He said, my father, Terry Phipps, former parish priest at St. James Marylebone, said was officiating, and the track they wanted played was track 1 on Queen's greatest hit, which of course is Bohemian Rhapsody. And he said to accompany the coffin on its final journey, but whoever was supposed to press stop at the end didn't press stop, because track 2 kicked into life, and it was Another One Bites the Dust.
There you go.
That's fantastic, isn't it?
There you go. So I was reading a thing this week, and I want to ask Alex about this. Johnny Greenwood of Radiohead was saying that when he first joined very early Radiohead, when they were called something slightly different, he was not confident at all about his keyboard playing, but he wants to be in the group. So he turned himself off. And so they did months of rehearsals with him broadly being approved of. And Tom York kept saying to him, I think you're really adding something to the quality of the sound. But only Johnny Greenwood knew that he'd turned off his keyboard totally. So he wasn't contributing at all. And I wondered if you, as a professional musician, had ever found yourself in the same situation.
When I left school to go and work in mines, I went back to visit this one time, and they said, "Oh, Alex, we've went to my old music department." I said, "Alex, we've just formed a wind band, and we're looking for a bass player." I went, that's nice. I went, "We're going to play in Paris, and there's a trip to Euro Disney in it." I went, "I'll step in." So I found myself in my old school's wind band, and being in my late teens, when they gave me the sheet music and purely indie. When they gave me the sheet music, I didn't bother to learn it, and I kind of wanted to go into Space Mountain at Euro Disney. That was it, really. That was all I was interested in, and which actually was really disappointing. It was a rubbish roller coaster. But so we got to Paris, and it was this gig in a hotel somewhere. I can't remember exactly where it was. But anyway, so I hadn't learned music, and I was surrounded by all these wind instruments, and I just turned myself down and skipped across the fretboard like a gazelle through the African savannah. It looked amazing, but I was playing absolutely nothing, and nobody noticed. To this day, I'm the only part. Up until this point, I've been the only person who knew about that. So there we go. It can be done.
It can be done. So long not being detected, though, because he was
right?
For a while, wasn't it? And the Tom York kept saying, "You're really adding wonderful textures,"
It's just brilliant. There's something a bit Spinal Tap about that, isn't it? It's great playing, Johnny. It's wonderful. You know exactly what to leave out.
Yeah.
Everything.
It's all about the spaces. It's all about the gaps.
I was also taken by a communication we had via Patreon with Ian McKenzie, who said we was talking about Dave Clark, which was the subject of our Down the Rabbit Hole podcasts, which are only available to Patreon listeners. So I'm sorry if you're not one of them.
Yeah.
Why not do something to remedy that situation as soon as possible by going to patreon.com/word in your ear and finding out how you might contribute. Anyway, Ian had heard the Dave Clark Down the Rabbit Hole, and he said that he actually met Dave Clark while he was walking here recently, last summer. He said, while he was walking his dog, and I was playing the guitar in Little Venice. And he sat down and asked me if I'd played for a long time, and then said I was good. I had no idea who he was, but asked if he played anything. He said he used to play the drums, but didn't anymore because he'd hurt his hands while skiing. I didn't recognize him, but I had sense he wasn't telling everything. I asked him if he ever played in any bands, and he said, I'm Dave Clark. There was no arrogance, but it was clear that he expected me to know what he meant, which I thought was really, really good point, actually. Because if you're Dave Clark, there's only one Dave Clark.
There's only one Dave Clark, and the name is in the title, so it's perfect.
It is really.
I was a member of Rare Bird, and you go, well, I'm not going to find out that. But I'm
you're
Dave
kind
Clark.
Of more famous than being a member of
Man or something,
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Dave Clark. Anyway, he was. He was apparently very nice and very complimentary to Ian's guitar playing. So I don't know if Ian was in a busking capacity in Little Venice, or he just simply felt moved to share his music with the world. So maybe he'll get in touch with us and let us know. Anything else we want to add? Any other business? What have we recorded recently? We recorded a chat with
done Jane Savage. Are these out? I can't remember now. This is the one
Alexis Petridis is imminent.
It's John, Alexis Petridis, which is very, very good.
It's absolutely fabulous.
I can't remember. It is.
John Ronson's not up yet either. No,
that's terrific. They're both terrific.
So it's all in waiting, and it's all even more reason why you might want to be a Patreon supporter, because you get this stuff first, and you get it in full glowing color where applicable. So we've coming up on the runway, ready to be launched. We got Alexis Petridis. Yes, Alex.
Indeed.
We got John Ronson, which we've done. We've done Michael Hann talking about his book Denim and Leather. Denim and Leather. And we got Jane Savage talking about the art of PR and all kinds of things like that. So there's a ton of stuff coming. So, if you want to get to it and get to it first, patreon.com/word in your ear. Anything further we got to add? Go on.
Well, we have what is a joyfulness of new patrons.
All right.
Oh, go on.
Which is the official collective noun for a group of patrons.
I get my bosun's whistle out.
Excellent.
Okay.
I should mention, actually, we have Matthew North to thank for the bosun's whistle being audible. He's a patron supporter. It is audible. There we are. Matthew's a patron supporter, and he works for the BBC, and he kindly emailed us to let us know how to adjust our settings to make it audible.
They probably do a course at the BBC, one day, and learning how to record bosun's whistle.
It's so popular. Yeah.
Go on.
Okie doke. Jason Brooks.
Excellent. It sort of works and then disappears.
Evan Lazarus.
Hurrah, Evan.
Great name.
Welcome aboard. Yeah, that's a great name, it is. Evan Lazarus on bass guitar.
Paul Wally.
Excellent. Well done. Thank you very much.
Gary Ashwell.
Splendid. Welcome aboard, Gary.
Mark Critch.
This is tremendous. Keep them coming.
And Jacqueline Langdon Jones.
Jacqueline, wonderful to have you.
Very good.
You're all hugely welcome, and we're very
welcome.
grateful.
One, welcome all, and we'll be in touch.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.